What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
Aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, November 22nd, 2017. Again, getting on back to Thanksgiving, you probably will not be surprised to find out that the original Thanksgiving isn't as it's popularly portrayed. First of all, it was actually held in June, on June 20th, 1676, and they weren't exactly sharing a meal with the Indians. They were actually celebrating having rid the land of the Indians by force of arms. A little bit of altered history there. Now, today is also the anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And we posted a few articles about that on whatreallyhappened.com. You might want to hunt down this multi-part series that appeared some years ago called The Men Who Killed Kennedy. And it's a very thorough examination of what happened. I notice it doesn't really seem to be on cable TV, and neither is Oliver Stone's JFK that I've been able to find so far. So it's like something the government kind of wants to fade away. But again, there were a few juicy little items in the recently declassified Kennedy papers, including confirmation of an entrance bullet wound to the front of the throat. And they cover that also on The Men Who Killed Kennedy. Then there was the Secret Service stand down, the video of the guy literally being told, no, don't get on the presidential car. And there was just all kind of stuff like that. All right, to get today's events here, Houston, we have a problem. And it turns out a key witness for Robert Mueller failed to show up in court today and has gone walkabout. Now, he didn't escape, but apparently this gentleman, Zarab, who's facing prosecution, he's in U.S. custody, but he's been moved. And nobody knows where he is. And it looks like maybe Mueller has pressured this individual to become a witness against other people in the Trump administration. And so they've moved him to basically keep him from anybody who might talk him out of that. Now, over at Judicial Watch, and again, Judicial Watch is doing a huge bang-up job, really. They always have, under Larry Klayman and now under Tom Fitton. And either one of these gentlemen would make a great attorney general, in my opinion. But Judicial Watch has released 79 pages of Justice Department documents concerning ethics issues related to FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe's involvement with his wife's political campaign. Now, McCabe was very much part of the FBI team that was giving Hillary Clinton a pass on her email server scandal. And apparently at the same time, Clinton and McAuliffe political groups donated nearly $700,000 to McCabe's wife's campaign, and that was about 40% of the campaign's total funds. So it smells like it's a payoff, and Judicial Watch is digging in to find out what's going on there. Meanwhile, Tom Fitton is out there on record saying that there's a pile of allegations against Hillary Clinton. And yes, we know, going all the way back 30 years. So there's far more evidence of wrongdoing for Hillary Clinton than there ever was for Donald Trump and his people. Interesting little article is pointing out how the Clintons and the Bushes are very much key to this push for a global government, and notes that if Hillary were to be prosecuted, charged, and imprisoned, it could actually trigger a domino effect that might actually bring down much of the core of the globalist movement around the world. I'd like to see that. I am opposed to a one-world government. The larger governments get, the more of a pain in the neck they are. Now, apparently, there's now talk about an investigation into that Deputy Director, Andrew McCabe, because apparently he was the guy who came on out and said that Hillary Clinton's email server investigation was being given a special class, special status, and that only the very top people at the FBI were going to be investigating that. So Representative Gates, ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, said to Laura Ingraham Tuesday evening, "I am immediately calling for an investigation into the special treatment the FBI gave Hillary." So pressure is building up, and the Clintons have lost a lot of their political influence. So at some point there's going to be a crossover between the rising public indignation and the declining Clinton political influence. And they'll cross over, and wonderful things will happen. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, newly filed court documents have confirmed that Fusion GPS, the company that was responsible for that ridiculous Trump dossier, actually did make payments to journalists to push that story. And they made payments between June 2016 until February 2017. So it was suspected, now it's confirmed. This was a bought and paid for smear job against Donald Trump, just like the bought and paid for smear job against Judge Roy Moore, because smear jobs are much more economical than running an honest campaign. And by the way, just as it didn't work on Trump, it isn't working on Roy Moore. He is still enjoying a very huge lead over his Democratic opponent. So getting on back to the story, even the Washington Post is now out there saying the Clintons should be investigated. Now, the New York Times went the other way and say, oh, there's nothing here to this Uranium One deal. Why are you wasting all of our time here? But if the Washington Post is starting to veer off and say it's time for an investigation, that's definitely a storm cloud on the horizon for the Clintons. Meanwhile, former Congresswoman and convicted felon Corrine Brown is about to have her sentencing hearing after being convicted of 18 counts of federal fraud and corruption last May. Is this the best this nation can do for leaders, legislators? Now, getting on over to more sexual allegations. As you know, it's no secret that Bill Clinton was a regular visitor to Jeff Epstein's island down in the Caribbean, would fly down there on Epstein's private plane, the Lolita Express. But apparently, some of the stuff that came out on Anthony Weiner's laptop were emails that showed that Hillary Clinton went down there 6 times. So that may have been the sexual scandal about Hillary that the caller was referring to earlier in the week. Interestingly enough, the Clinton Presidential Library is refusing to hand over information on Bill Clinton's ties to Jeff Epstein. And I didn't realize presidential libraries had the authority to classify documents. I thought if it was in the library, it was there for researchers to be looking at, but apparently not. And again, there's nothing new here. Going on back all the way to the Franklin scandal, we ran this story that came on out of Galactic Connection about how the Bush administration fired the agents investigating the Franklin scandal to try and cover it up. And apparently part of this whole trading in underage children for sexual purposes was being used also to blackmail the people who were taking advantage of that situation. So apparently it did go all the way up to the White House. Remember that big stink where apparently there was some kind of sexual allegations around the Justice Department and Hillary shut that investigation down? Boy, Washington, D.C. must be a wild town. I thought Hollywood was wild. From some of the parties I went to in my younger, more reckless, wild days. But apparently Washington, D.C. makes Hollywood look like a school picnic. Speaking of Hollywood, they're out there building the buzz about a new movie, Call Me By Your Name, which is about an older man's relationship with an underage boy. In other words, they're trying to glamorize pedophilia in the middle of Hollywood's own pedophilia scandal. So we're going to take a break for commercials, try and sort out why we're having all these technical issues, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we've switched Skype machines, and hopefully our sound is going to be a lot better. I understand it's great over on BAM User, but we will work out these problems, even though we're on this shoestring budget. So anyway, I want to go on back to this. Hollywood right now is dealing with this sexual assault scandal. Everybody's being accused. Some are probably guilty. Some are probably innocent. But at the same time they're doing this, they're coming on out with this movie that is apparently attempting to glamorize pedophilia, and it's supposedly getting Oscar buzz. They're going to run this thing for an Academy Award. And it's certainly very poor timing, but the industry is out there just pushing and promoting this thing. Maybe they're trying to push and promote it because of concern that people won't go to see it at all, given the current scandal that's going on. All right, enough of the fluffy news. We're going to get into the war zones here. A lot of stuff going on. Over in Syria, the Army has launched a new military operation in the Euphrates Valley, and what they're finding is that there are still some ISIS cells running around there, and they've captured 8 villages. And what the Syrian army is noticing is that ISIS seems to be able to move about in the areas held by the U.S.-backed opposition without any resistance at all, despite claims from the U.S. that they too are opposed to ISIS. So something is not adding up. Now, Eric Shawn is out there reporting that there may be new U.S. airstrikes directed at Syria's government. And the only way they're going to get away with that is they're going to have to be another false flag, another fake chemical attack against a school or something like that. But, I mean, just hauling off and bombing Syria's government, that is an act of war, and that could bring U.S. forces into direct contact with the Russians. So these people are nuts. President Recep Erdogan is slamming the current U.S. policy in Syria, as well he should, because the U.S. basically has lost it. Their real agenda was to get rid of Assad, and Assad is still there. Now, apparently Turkey is seriously considering pulling out of NATO completely over that faux pas of listing Erdogan as the enemy during the recent war games. That could actually put a real strain on the rest of the alliance, because not everybody's a member of NATO is 100% happy with that. So it's like Brexit started this whole idea of member states leaving the EU. If Turkey leaves NATO, it's probably going to give some other countries the same idea. We want out of NATO. We don't want to be part of a war with Russia. Now, as you know, Putin had a meeting with Assad, then he had a phone call with President Trump that lasted for about an hour, and Trump came on out with this statement that we're talking strongly about bringing peace to Syria. I have a feeling a lot more than peace was being talked about, and I think Putin probably just laid down the law and said, you have no business being there. We're in Syria at the express invite of the Syrian government. You are not. Your continued military occupation is an aggression. And I'm sure the subject of Sekdef Mattis' comment about we're going to stay in Syria even if ISIS is gone probably resulted in a little bit of discussion as well. But for Trump to come on out and make that very bland statement tells me that Putin probably ran that discussion, that phone call. Now, Lebanon's Prime Minister, Hariri, has finally returned to Beirut. Maybe that'll calm things down over there. And he's saying his resignation is actually on hold pending talks. Because remember, his resignation was never formally accepted by Lebanon's government. So he's still the prime minister. And it looks like he's coming back. Meanwhile, he's telling his supporters, I'm staying with you. So whatever was going on with this resignation, it apparently didn't produce the result that Hariri or Saudi Arabia intended it to. All righty, getting on back to the serious news. Can you tell I'm already in kind of vacation mood? I'm just getting silly here. Apparently, there is this village on Jerusalem's hillside that is getting ready to be demolished by Israel. And the village is called Lifta, and it's on a tentative list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. And the World Monuments Fund organization has put it on its list of sites under threat. This is an historical area, and Israel wants to erase it. They're literally trying to sell the idea, oh, there was never such a thing as Palestine. It was all made up by those anti-Semites. Now, there's another article. This is from Desert Peace. And it's talking about the seeming new emergence of Arab complicity in the liquidation of Palestine. And ever since Israel was created on Palestinian land, there has been this divide where the Arab nations, the Muslim nations, all say, yes, Israel can be there, but there must be a Palestinian state as well. And Israel has been putting all these international settlements all over the West Bank, trying to break it up so there's no contiguous piece of land left for the Palestinian state. And, of course, they're annexing East Jerusalem as fast as they can because that was supposed to be the future capital of the Palestinian state. And now, all of a sudden, we're hearing indications that some of these other Arab nations are ready to go along with that. Now, I'm hesitating to be declarative on this because there was a story that came out last week about how Saudi Arabia was ready to throw Palestine under the bus to get all buddy-buddy with Israel. Then that was denied by Saudi Arabia's foreign minister, who came on out and said, no, we're not getting close, and we still demand a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. So there's a lot of confusion over there. Meanwhile, the UN rapporteur for human rights in the occupied territories came out with this harsh report, basically saying there needs to be sanctions on Israel for driving Palestinians back to the Dark Ages. Because every time Israel stages another one of these attacks on Gaza, they'll blow up the power stations, they'll blow up the modern infrastructure, and bit by bit, the standard of living for the Palestinians is being sent back in time. Now, Dr. Ashwari, in an article over at memc.org, has come on out and said the U.S. is disqualifying itself as a regional peace broker. And we have said the same thing here for a very, very long time, especially since 9/11. The United States has abandoned even the pretense of being an impartial negotiator between Israel and the rest of the Middle East, and has come down firmly on the side of Israel, which is why I'm convinced Israel is blackmailing the U.S. government with the truth behind 9/11. Because if you look at Israel's behavior, their arrogance and their demands, it just skyrocketed right after 9/11. Very sharp increase, called attention to itself. Now, an official source from the Syrian Foreign Ministry has condemned last Sunday's Saudi-fronted anti-Iranian Hezbollah meeting of the Arab League, and basically said that the Arab League has become a tool for implementing imperialist agendas. And it certainly does seem that way. Goes on to say the Arab League has been degraded into becoming a tool steered by the money of the oil sheikdoms against the interests of the Arab nations and its existence, as well as common security goals, while being guided by implementation of dictates of the nation's enemies. A lot of corruption out there. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the U.S. government sending offensive weapons to Ukraine, and concern that it could trigger a major explosion there in violence. But it turns out there are companies in the U.S. who are already sending lethal weapons to Ukraine. Airtronic USA in Texas has a license and is sending grenade launchers to Ukraine. This is a report from Voice of America. And the company's CEO, Richard Wendiver, says that he started cooperation with Ukraine 2 years ago, and the first deliveries of grenade launchers began in 2016. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And as you may have heard on the corporate media, there has been a crash of a U.S. Navy plane off the coast of Japan. There were 11 people on the aircraft. 8 have been found alive, are in good condition. They're still looking for the other 3. So, again, U.S. equipment just seems to be falling out of the sky or breaking down or crashing into other things. Apparently, they're still having no luck finding that missing submarine. And at this point, if it was on the bottom, they're out of oxygen. That's a horrible way to go. Let's talk about the economic news for a little bit. The economic news is not good, despite what the stock market may be trying to convince you. The American dream is effectively dead. The average U.S. household is $137,000 in debt. 38.4% of millennials are living with their parents. After they're done paying those usurious student loans and unable to find a high-paying job with those useless college degrees, they don't have any money left over for rent, let alone buying a home. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And one of the comments I've made about current affairs in the world is how the U.S. is making war while our supposed enemies, Russia and China, are building things and making deals. And China, of course, is doing the Silk Road Belt to speed commerce between Europe and China and Russia. And Russia is now doing a major project to open up a northern sea route. And if there's any country that knows how to deal with harsh Arctic weather, it's Russia. They have the world's only nuclear-powered icebreakers, for example. And what they're getting ready to do is establish a route along the northern edge of Russia to speed commerce again to Europe. And they're saying that basically this will cut shipping time almost in half. And the other positive is that it means they don't have to use the Suez Canal, which is right in the middle of an area that looks to be on the verge of a regional war. So that's another reason why people don't want to go the traditional shipping routes. It's another reason why China's Silk Road Belt is looking increasingly attractive. So Russia is investing a huge amount of resources into new generation icebreakers to keep the sea lanes open, and hardened, ice-capable supertankers and cargo carriers. And it will dramatically change the shipping industry for much of the world. Now then, J. Crew, like so many other retailers, is hitting hard times. Sales have plunged. they're getting ready to close 50 of their stores. And you know, if they're doing that just at the start of the holiday shopping season, which begins tomorrow, you know they're really in trouble. Now, getting on to Europe, apparently the United Nations is predicting there's going to be a second mass migrant wave to Europe, and they're saying it's imminent. And Europe is really beginning to panic, except for Brussels and Angela Merkel, who think this is all hunky-dory. But apparently Great Britain is going to pay France millions more to stop a new wave of migrants coming out of Calais and crossing through the Channel Tunnel. So Great Britain is now sending France this money, which France supposedly will use to bolster their security along the highways leading to the Channel Tunnel. Over in Sweden, things are so bad there now that joggers in the city of Oskarshamn now can ask for armed police officers to accompany them while they're out jogging because there have been so many attacks. All of this that we're seeing in Europe is coming here. It's already started in a lot of places. It's all because this idea of open borders and that humans have a right to just go wherever they want. And the problem is that when you open up the borders wide and you're not being selective who comes into your country, what comes into your country includes gang members, people fleeing prosecution, criminals, rapists, and the contagious. Now, as you know, Hungary, and particularly Orban, have been on the warpath against George Soros, saying that he is to blame for much of the damage done to Europe through the open borders policy, and that it's time to investigate George Soros for how much influence he has on leaders in Europe, and whether bribes were involved or other encouragements. And now the U.S. State Department is giving $700,000 to Hungarian media to support George Soros. And they're paying for programming that will propagandize the people of Hungary against Orban and nationalists. Talk about interfering in the internal affairs of other nations. There's a good example. There's been another hate crime hoax. This was over at Parkway Central High School in Chesterfield, Missouri. And apparently somebody wrote "White Lives Matter" and the N-words on a mirror inside of a girl's bathroom. And everybody was triggered, and oh my goodness, it's racist, and those white people, they've got to go. And it turned out it was a non-white student who did this. And it's past time for the government and the corporate media to acknowledge that there are so many hate crime hoaxes. It's an epidemic out there for political purposes. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. Now, this story, it's a case of, the mom was technically wrong, but maybe the government's going a little too far. Basically, it has to do with a mother in Norfolk, West Virginia, who was concerned about how school officials were doing nothing to stop her 9-year-old daughter from being bullied at school. So she put a digital audio recorder in her daughter's backpack to record the bullying. Now, the school found the recorder, and they charged the mother with felony use of a device to intercept oral communication and misdemeanor contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and she's looking at 5 years in prison on that felony charge. And I think that's excessive. I think that case ought to be tossed out. I mean, look at the position the mother was put in. Her daughter is being bullied. We know that this generation of students can be very violent. We had that story about 45 teachers up in Philadelphia have quit teaching because they're being beaten up by their own students. So the school was doing absolutely nothing about the bullying, and the mother wanted to protect her daughter. So I hope the prosecutor who actually gets this case just says this is nonsense, or get a judge that says this is ridiculous. This is a very poor application of the law. Now here's another case of overreaction, and this goes back to that phone call that we got about apparently somebody had a gun in a gun case, thought there was a gun store, gun repair place in the mall. It wasn't. Was going back to his car, called the police. The police locked down the mall for the rest of the day. Here's another example. And apparently this innocent man's home was destroyed by police after 50 SWAT officers responded to reports of a man shoplifting a shirt and 2 belts from a store. And the man whose home was destroyed, Leo Leck, did not have any ties to the individual the officers were pursuing. We're not even sure why they showed up at that address. But they showed up and launched a 19-hour standoff that included the use of armored vehicles, breaching rams, high-caliber rifles, chemical agents, flashbang grenades, and remote-controlled robots. And the home was declared collateral damage. It was a total loss. They destroyed the house. And the police gave him $5,000 in compensation. And so if I read this right, the guy the police were chasing just hopped into this home, just picked one at random. And the cops just demolished the place. And said, here's $5,000. That should make everything okay. Another scandal with all this sexual assault stuff. A while back, the USA gymnastics team doctor, Larry Nassar, was accused of sexual abuse of team members of the Olympic team, and apparently a lot of the girls have since gone public saying, yes, it happened. And Larry Nassar has now pled guilty to sexual assault. They were expecting to plead not guilty, but just before the trial got started, he changed his plea. I want to ask a question, and this applies to all these people who are inappropriately engaged in sexual contact with other people that's unwelcome, and especially with children. Are they on prescription antidepressants? Because I'm looking at this increasingly bizarre behavior of the American people as a whole. And I'm wondering if it's because we're being medicated into a psychotic state. Now, we already know there's a link between prescription antidepressants and violence. But prescription antidepressants, they basically remove your inhibitions. They make it very difficult to resist an impulse. Impulse control is a major problem. I remember one story from over at ssris.org about an attempted suicide, where they got to the young man in time, and when it was all over, and they said, why did you do it? And he said, I don't know. It just popped into my head, and I couldn't help myself. Because I think looking around, we have to acknowledge that there seem to be a lot of nutcases walking around the street, walking around Capitol Hill, walking around the Hollywood studios, walking around Wall Street. Now here's a good one, getting on back to guns and gun stores. The founder of Fusion GPS, Glenn Simpson, is now claiming Russian spies have infiltrated the National Rifle Association. Now, he did not elaborate on the claim, but apparently the idea now is that if you're a gun lover and you support the NRA, you're a Russian stooge. We're going to have to take you before the House Select Committee on Un-American Activities, which they're going to bring back. Maybe they're going to dig up Joseph McCarthy. I mean, it really is silly. And back in the 1950s, this kind of stuff worked because the American people were very naive, very trusting, very gullible. But those days are gone. Now, Essentia Health in Minnesota has fired 50 employees because they refused to get the flu shots. And the healthcare provider set a deadline for employees to get the flu shots or to get a doctor who would give them an exemption for the flu shots. And they were also allowed to opt out for religious reasons. But it basically came on down to this idea. They still believe that the flu shot is going to increase patient safety. And so they fired these 50 employees. Now, the problem with that is the people who've got the vaccines are the contagious ones. You don't get the flu or the mumps or the measles from healthy people who have not been vaccinated. You are more likely to get these illnesses from people who have the vaccines because they're sweating that pathogen. And remember, it came out about a week ago that the way they manufacture the flu vaccine alters the flu virus. They culture it in egg whites, and the virus mutates to a flu that attacks chickens, which means when you get the vaccine, you're building antibodies for the wrong kind of flu, and that's why the flu vaccine has been so ineffective. But they're still out there pushing it because it makes money. It makes lots of money. Now, we've been talking about the crisis in American tap water, how it's heavily contaminated. Nobody seems interested in fixing it. Their solution is go on out and buy bottled water. Yes, it's more expensive, but you know it's healthy and clean, and you can just pretend all that plumbing in your house is just a decoration. But apparently there is a town in Michigan that is trying to block Nestle's attempt to steal millions of liters of water from the Great Lakes. Now, Nestle is trying to build a pipeline booster pumping station near the town of Evart, Michigan, in an effort to supply more water to its plant in Stanwood, 50 kilometers away. And the town is saying, basically, there's an upper limit on how much water can be taken out. And they're concerned that this added pumping station means Nestle is going to take more water than they're really allowed to. But I think we need to go back to having safe, clean water provided to us by the water utilities. That's what they're supposed to do. Now, we're very lucky here in Hawaii. We've got really good water. It's exceptionally hard. But I remember when I was a kid, nobody had any problem with the water coming out of faucets. You could drink out of the garden hose. Nobody worried about that. Anyway, the other day we were talking about internet speeds. We were talking about how Spectrum got sued by the state of New York because they're not actually delivering the bandwidth that they advertise or bill for. And I commented on the irony that the United States, which invented the internet, has fallen way behind the rest of the world in internet speeds. And so somebody sent me this article from Recode.net. The United States ranks 28th in the world in mobile internet speeds. 28th. And this is critical because more and more people are interacting with the World Wide Web over their mobile devices. But it's another sign of a nation in decline. Because governing is choosing, and governing is prioritizing, and we've got to spend the money on bombs and bullets and poison gas to give to the Syrian rebels to kill Syrians and blame Assad for. We can't fritter away the money on things like better infrastructure. You people are just complaining too much. Now, as you know, we're coming up on this vote where the FCC clearly intends to end net neutrality. And along with that, apparently the FCC has voted to allow the media monopolies to decide what local news you will see. Now, that's a very dangerous precedent. Obviously, the large corporate media is controlling and filtering the national news. But up until now, your local news basically was your local news. And yes, there were items being fed on in, but apparently now the FCC thinks that the network should decide what the local news is going to carry and what they're not going to carry. They're trying to centralize control over all the propaganda. And by the way, they ran the movie 1984 on cable yesterday. It's a very dark film, but we're there. We're pretty much there. Fake news from the government, endless wars based on lies, use of torture, televisions that watch us. Anyway. Now, as you know, Eric Schmidt came on out the other day and said that Google's algorithms were going to be written to start de-ranking Russia Today and Sputnik News. Well, now he's reversed that and said that there is no concrete plan to de-rank content of Russian media. There was apparently a huge public pushback of people saying, we're not going to use Google News. You know, you give us the news, let us decide what's real and what isn't real. So we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. Back to the show here, and grab your pencils and papers, people, because the address, if you want to support Republic Broadcasting, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. And if you want to phone on in with a donation via credit card or debit card, the number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. Now, getting on back to the world of computers, earlier in the week we reported on how security experts had discovered that an anti-malware feature in Microsoft Windows, address space layout randomization, had stopped working in both Windows 8 and Windows 10, and they suggested that this was obviously some kind of a bug. Microsoft has now issued a statement saying that address space layout randomization is working as intended, and the lack of randomization is a feature, not a bug, which suggests that Microsoft got an instruction to turn that off because it was interfering with the government getting into your machines. Now, apparently, if you are a user of Linux 4.14, you need to disable bcache, because apparently there is an issue in there that results in massive data corruption. I think we've allowed the technology to become too complicated. Can't manage it anymore. Rome went through the same thing during its collapse. During Rome's golden age, they were doing all this amazing engineering. They invented concrete, and they built the road system and the aqueducts and buildings that are still standing today. But then as Rome sank into debt, they simply couldn't maintain what they had built before, and it all started falling into ruin. And it feels like that's what's happening here in this country. By the way, for those of you who like your privacy, apparently Google Chrome's incognito mode has been declared as worthless. And this is an article that came out of governmentslaves.info. And apparently that, it is still possible to get information regarding who you are through that incognito mode. Maybe Google just put it in there to make you feel like you were a little bit more private. Because certainly Google and all these other companies understand that privacy has become very important to users of the Internet. We don't want other people to know where we're going, what we're looking at. And it's a matter of principle. It's not that we're doing anything wrong. It's just we're private. We have an instinct for privacy. And so we may be seeing the beginning of browsers that are saying, we promise to protect your privacy, just as a marketing gimmick. Now, down on the island of Bali, there's been an eruption of Mount Agung. And, of course, 2 months ago it began to rumble and make the kind of noises that it might be erupting. And now it has erupted. So hopefully it won't be too bad. But, boy, it does seem like the entire Pacific Ring of Fire is just rocking and rolling right now, geologically. Now, we all know IKEA. I actually wish we had one here in Hawaii, but we don't. But when I lived in Southern California, we went there and we bought the furniture, and I loved putting it all together with the Allen wrenches and everything they supplied, although apparently that's going away, and they're now going to just this sort of tongue-and-groove kind of locking system. But they've had a little bit of problem because apparently they had this line of dressers for children's room that were up on these legs that were spaced too narrowly. And apparently kids climbing on the front of these dressers were pulling them over. And apparently 8 kids have been killed. And only after the 8th child died, IKEA issued a recall. And as much as I like IKEA, I have to wag my finger at them and say, the recall should have happened after the first child was killed, when you looked at the design of the dresser and realized that the kid climbing on it, and kids are going to climb on everything in their room. That's just a fact of nature. You should have issued the recall at that point. Now, apparently, North Korea is all of a sudden very upset over having been put on the list of terror-sponsoring nations. And I can understand why they're upset, because it opens the door to more restrictions on North Korea from the U.S. and its allies, more sanctions. And again, it's just another in an escalating series of provocations that Hillary Clinton sold the nerve gas to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria in order to use them as an excuse to invade Syria, which I don't think is going to surprise anybody who's been paying attention, but that's really what's been going on. Meanwhile, Hillary is out there commenting on Al Franken when she's not talking about being president of an alternative Earth, saying that he's a friend of mine. He doesn't need to resign right now. This is all about control of the Congress. You know, Republican accused abusers, they've got to resign. They've got to step down. They need to go right now. Democratic abusers, they're wonderful people. He's just being a comedian. He doesn't need to resign. We're going to have all of these things here going on. This is a story that is just breaking over at government slaves, and actually InfoWars had it first. Apparently, Texas Congressman Joe Barton, there's a video apparently he made himself of abusing himself sexually. I'm trying to put this as delicately as I can. And apparently it's online. This guy has to be on some kind of drugs. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous how some of these people are behaving. Anyway, we're getting into winter. Al Gore's still out there saying that the world is warming, it's all your fault, and you need to be paying carbon taxes. But apparently Wyoming just set a new record for snowfall, 100 inches. And apparently this storm is terrible. They had 9 semi-trucks that were literally blown over in the high winds. This is going to be a very hard winter. And hopefully this will be the end of all that nonsense about human-caused global warming, because it was a scam to get your money, to get your obedience, to convince you to lower your standard of living so that there would be more for the elites to enjoy for themselves. But it was a scam. Climate has always changed. human impact on it is microscopic at best. That big fusing ball of hydrogen up there in the sky controls climate here on Earth.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.